Have you ever wondered what life is really like behind the walls of Balmoral Castle? To the outside world, Balmoral looks like something straight out of fairy tale. A grand Scottish castle surrounded by mountains, forests, rivers, and endless green landscapes. It is often described as a royal family's favorite retreat, a place where kings, queens, princes, and princesses escape the pressures of public life. But what if the reality behind those granite walls is very different from the picture people usually see? For more than 170 years, Balmoral has remained one of the most private royal residences in the world. Generations of staff members have worked there, serving monarchs, caring for the estate, and helping preserve traditions that date back to the Victorian era. Many of those traditions have survived wars, political changes, and even the modern age. And according to former employees, some of them can seem surprisingly strict. The story begins in the summer of 1852. At the time, Prince Albert was searching for a peaceful retreat away from London's crowded streets and constant political attention. During that search, he became fascinated with a Scottish estate hidden deep within the Highlands. The property was called Balmoral. What started as a simple purchase soon became one of the most important places in royal history. The original house wasn't nearly as impressive as the castle we know today, but Prince Albert saw potential where others saw limitations. Within a few years, the old structure was replaced by a much larger granite castle, designed to blend with the dramatic Scottish landscape. Albert took a personal interest in almost every detail. He reviewed designs, discussed layouts, and reportedly contributed ideas that would shape the appearance of the estate for generations. By the mid-1850s, Balmoral had become much more than a holiday home. It was becoming a private royal world. Over time, additional land was purchased until the estate stretched across tens of thousands of acres. Forests, mountains, rivers, hunting grounds, cottages, farm buildings. Everything was carefully woven together into a self-contained kingdom hidden from public view. And unlike many royal properties connected to the state, Balmoral remained a personal possession of the royal family. That distinction would make it different from almost every other famous royal residence in Britain. For Queen Victoria, Balmoral became something deeply personal. She often described the Highlands as a place of peace and freedom, away from formal ceremonies and public expectations. She felt she could live a more natural life. Visitors frequently noticed how different the atmosphere seemed compared to royal residences in London. The Scottish air, the forests, the distant mountains. Everything created the feeling of escape. Yet, while the royals came to relax, a completely different reality existed behind the scenes. Every year, a large workforce arrived to prepare the estate. Housekeepers, gardeners, gamekeepers, chefs, drivers, maintenance crews, stable workers, and dozens of others whose names never appeared in newspapers. Together, they kept the enormous property functioning. For many of them, Balmoral represented a prestigious opportunity. Working for the royal household carried a sense of honor and tradition, but it also demanded discipline. Former staff members have often described a world governed by strict etiquette and routines. Certain customs were treated almost like sacred rituals. Everything had a proper way. Everything had a correct procedure. And mistakes were rarely welcomed. One of the most famous traditions connected to royal life is the emphasis on respect. For generations, royal households have followed detailed rules concerning greetings, behavior, and formal conduct. To outsiders, these customs can appear fascinating. To employees, they often became part of daily life. The schedule itself could be demanding. Long before most visitors woke up, staff members were already moving through corridors preparing rooms, cleaning common areas, organizing meals, and making sure every part of the estate was ready for another day. During busy periods, the workload could become intense. Large events meant more guests. More guests meant more preparation. And more preparation meant longer hours. Yet despite the hard work, many employees stayed for years. Some remained for decades. Why? Because Balmoral offered something few workplaces could provide: a front-row seat to history. Throughout the years, some of the most important moments in modern royal history unfolded on this estate. Political discussions, family celebrations, private holidays, moments of joy, moments of heartbreak, all hidden behind the same stone walls. The castle became a place where monarchs could step away from cameras and public expectations. That privacy made Balmoral unique. It also made it a magnet for rumors. Whenever the public knew very little about what happened inside, speculation filled the gaps. Stories circulated, whispers spread, and former employees occasionally found themselves at the center of controversy. Over the decades, a number of royal staff members published books, interviews, or memoirs describing their experiences. Some portrayed royal life as surprisingly warm and human. Others painted a more complicated picture. Those accounts helped fuel public fascination with what really happened behind closed doors. One recurring theme appeared again and again: secrecy. For the royal household, privacy wasn't simply preferred. It was essential. Employees were expected to protect sensitive information and respect the private lives of the family they served. That expectation created a culture where discretion was valued above almost everything else. The less said, the better. The less shared, the safer. But maintaining complete silence becomes difficult when hundreds of people work on a single estate. Eventually, stories always find a way out. And some of those stories revealed a side of Balmoral that many people never expected. Not a world of luxury and endless comfort, but a world of hard work, strict standards, and traditions that seemed frozen in time. As the years passed, another question quietly emerged. Could those traditions survive in the modern world? Because while the castle itself remained largely unchanged, the people working there were changing. New generations brought new expectations, new attitudes, new ideas about work-life balance. And slowly, tension began to grow between centuries-old customs and modern workplace realities. What happened next would spark criticism, debate, and renewed scrutiny of life behind the gates of one of the world's most famous royal estates. And according to former employees, the biggest challenges were still ahead. The image of Balmoral that most people see is simple: a peaceful royal retreat surrounded by breathtaking scenery. A place where kings and queens escape the spotlight. A castle filled with tradition, history, and quiet elegance. But according to former workers, life behind the scenes could be very different. While visitors admired the beauty of the estate, many staff members were focused on something else entirely: getting through another demanding day. The mornings often started before sunrise. Long before guests appeared for breakfast, staff members were already moving through corridors, preparing rooms, organizing supplies, and making sure every detail met royal standards. In a place built on tradition, even the smallest mistake could feel enormous. A misplaced item, a dusty shelf, an incorrectly prepared room. Everything mattered. Former employees have described an environment where perfection wasn't simply encouraged, it was expected. And when expectations remain high every single day, pressure inevitably follows. For decades, Balmoral operated according to routines that had changed very little since Victorian times. Many workers felt they were stepping into a living museum. Old customs remained alive. Old rules remained intact. And sometimes those rules seemed strangely disconnected from the modern world. Yet that was exactly what made Balmoral unique. The estate wasn't trying to be modern. It was trying to preserve a way of life that had existed for generations. That mission created a constant tension. Tradition on one side, modern expectations on the other. As years passed, the gap between those two worlds became increasingly difficult to ignore. The issue wasn't necessarily the work itself. Many employees genuinely loved being part of royal history. The problem was a growing feeling that the demands continued to increase, while recognition often remained limited. Several former staff members later described a culture where dedication was simply assumed. You were expected to work hard, expected to remain professional, expected to stay loyal, and expected to do it quietly. For some, that sense of duty became a source of pride. For others, it became exhausting. The challenge became even greater because Balmoral is not located in a major city. The estate sits deep within the Scottish Highlands, far from the convenience and opportunities available elsewhere. Living and working there often meant becoming part of a small, isolated community. Some employees enjoyed that lifestyle. Others found it difficult, especially during long seasons when work seemed endless. But if there was one thing Balmoral protected above all else, it was privacy. For generations, the royal family viewed the estate as a sanctuary, a place where they could relax without constant public scrutiny. That privacy came with strict expectations. Staff members understood that discretion wasn't optional. It was part of the job. Stories from inside the estate rarely reached the outside world, and when they did, they often created enormous controversy. Throughout the 20th century, several former employees published books or gave interviews describing life behind palace walls. Each revelation sparked headlines. Each headline triggered fresh debates, and each debate raised the same question. How much should the public know about the private lives of the royal family? For palace officials, the answer was obvious: very little. For publishers and journalists, the answer was usually the opposite. As a result, every leak became a battle between privacy and public curiosity. Some stories were harmless: accounts of family dinners, holiday traditions, funny moments involving children and pets. But other claims painted a more complicated picture, one that suggested life behind royal walls wasn't always as glamorous as people imagined. Those stories fascinated the public because they revealed something unexpected. The royals, despite their status, faced many of the same family tensions experienced by ordinary people: arguments, misunderstandings, personal struggles, moments of sadness, moments of uncertainty. Balmoral witnessed all of them. In fact, some of the most significant royal family crises unfolded while family members were staying there. Major decisions were discussed. Relationships changed. History quietly unfolded behind closed doors. Yet even during difficult periods, Balmoral remained the family's preferred refuge, perhaps because it offered something no palace in London could provide: distance. Distance from reporters, distance from politics, distance from public pressure. But while the royal family could escape to Balmoral, employees often couldn't escape their responsibilities. The estate required constant maintenance. Gardens had to be cared for. Buildings had to be preserved. Guests had to be accommodated. Meals had to be prepared. The sheer scale of the property meant there was always work waiting. And according to some former employees, that workload became increasingly difficult in recent years, particularly as labor shortages affected industries across Britain. Finding experienced workers became harder. Keeping them became even harder. Some former staff members claimed morale suffered. Others argued the challenges reflected broader economic pressures affecting workplaces everywhere. Regardless of the cause, reports of staff turnover began attracting attention. Suddenly, the focus wasn't only on the royal family. It was on the people working behind the scenes: the gardeners, the cleaners, the housekeepers, the workers responsible for maintaining one of the world's most famous estates. Critics questioned whether traditional employment practices could survive in a modern environment. Supporters argued that working for the royal household remained a unique honor. Both sides believed they were right, and the debate continues today. What makes the story so fascinating is that Balmoral exists in two worlds at once. To millions of people, it represents history, tradition, and national heritage. To employees, it is also a workplace. Those two realities don't always fit together perfectly. Preserving centuries-old customs can be expensive, demanding, and sometimes controversial. Yet changing those customs risks altering the very character that makes Balmoral special. That conflict lies at the heart of nearly every debate surrounding this state. How do you preserve history without becoming trapped by it? How do you honor tradition while adapting to modern expectations? And how do you protect privacy in an age where secrets rarely stay hidden for long? Those questions have followed Balmoral for decades, and they aren't disappearing anytime soon. Because behind the castle walls, beyond the tourist photographs and royal headlines, lies a complicated story. A story about loyalty, duty, tradition, power, and the people whose lives revolve around keeping one of the world's most famous royal retreats running. The public sees the castle, but rarely the workers who make everything possible. And perhaps that is the greatest Balmoral mystery of all. Not what happens inside the castle, but how much remains hidden from view. Because every historic palace has its legends, every royal family has its secrets, and every great estate has stories that may never be fully told.